The hum of the fluorescent lights was the first thing Jason noticed when he regained consciousness. A dull, droning noise that pressed against his skull like an oppressive force. He groaned and pushed himself off the cold, dirty yellow carpet. The musty smell of dampness thickened the air. He blinked, trying to make sense of his surroundings. The walls were an unremarkable shade of faded beige, covered in a patterned wallpaper that seemed to shift slightly when he wasn't looking directly at it. The ceiling, lined with flickering fluorescent panels, stretched endlessly in all directions. There were no windows, no doors, just an infinite expanse of identical hallways, stretching beyond his line of sight. Panic bubbled in his chest as he spun around. Hello, his voice barely echoed, swallowed by the dense, unnatural silence. Jason tried to remember how he got here. He had been in his apartment, working late into the night when he got up to grab a drink. Then, nothing. No memory of falling, no transition. One moment he had been there, and now he was here in this impossible, endless labyrinth. The silence felt heavier the longer he stood still, so he chose a direction and started walking. His footsteps were muted by the carpet, and each turn led to more of the same, monotonous walls, buzzing lights, and unsettling sensation of being watched. After what felt like hours, he noticed something different. A dark stain on the floor. He crouched to inspect it. It was damp, slightly sticky. Blood. The sound of shuffling footsteps made him freeze. He turned slowly, heart hammering against his ribs. Down the hallway, just past the flickering light, something moved. At first, it looked like a shadow, but then it stepped forward, its movements jerky, unnatural. A figure humanoid but wrong, its limbs too long, its head tilted at an impossible angle. It didn't have a face, only a smooth, pale surface where features should be. Jason stumbled backward, his breath caught in his throat. The thing cocked its head as if studying him, then let out a guttural clicking sound. It took a step forward. Jason turned and ran. The hallways twisted and blurred as he sprinted blindly, heart pounding, legs burning. Every turn led to more of the same. The walls, the lights, the endless corridors. The sound of pursuit never faded. The creature was following, relentless, tireless. A sudden turn brought him to something new, a door. It was the first he had seen, a simple wooden door slightly ajar. He didn't hesitate. Jason pushed through, slamming it shut behind him, his back pressed against the wood as he panted, listening. The hallway beyond was silent. Had he lost it? He turned to look at the room he had entered. Unlike the endless halls outside, this space felt wrong in a different way. The walls were lined with old, flickering CRT televisions, each displaying distorted, glitching images. Some showed places he recognized. His apartment, his office, his childhood home. Others displayed impossible scenes. Rooms filled with writhing, shadowy figures, vast landscapes of pulsating flesh. A long hallway lined with doors identical to the one he had just entered. As he stepped forward, the static on one of the screens coalesced into an image of himself. Jason froze. The version of him on the screen was standing in the very room he was in, looking at the television, but then it moved on its own. The Jason on the screen turned to face the door. He reached for the handle. Jason's breath caught as he realized the door behind him was opening. He spun just as the door creaked wider. The darkness beyond was thick, almost alive. Then a hand, pale, too many fingers, unnaturally long, reached through. Jason stumbled back as the thing emerged. It was like the creature from before, but its face was shifting, rippling like water, as if it were trying to form features but failing. A gurgling sound escaped its throat and it lunged. Jason barely dodged, throwing himself to the side as the creature's elongated fingers swiped through the air where he had just been. He scrambled to his feet and ran towards another door at the far end of the room. It was locked. Behind him, the creature twisted its body unnaturally, its head snapping toward him. The televisions flickered wildly, images distorting, faces appearing. His face twisted in agony, screaming out. Jason pounded on the door. "Please, let me out." A click. The door swung open and he fell through, into another hallway. But this one was different. The walls were smooth, metallic. The air was cold or tinged with a sterile scent. The buzzing lights were gone, replaced with dim, pulsating red lights that cast long shadows. Something was wrong with gravity here. His steps felt heavier, his movements sluggish. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the walls. It wasn't like the fluorescent hum from before. This was deeper, more organic. A breathing sound. Then he saw them. Figures lined the walls, pressed into the surface as if they had been absorbed. Their faces were contorted in silent screams, their hands reaching outward, frozen in place. Jason's stomach turned as he recognized one of them, his own reflection trapped within the metallic wall, its eyes darting frantically, mouth opening in a soundless plea. "I know," he whispered. Something shifted behind him. He turned. The hallway was no longer empty. The creature was there, but it wasn't alone. More of them emerging from the walls, their movements unnatural, their blank faces contorting as if trying to form expressions. One stepped forward, reaching out a hand with too many fingers, its whispery voice echoing in the space between them. "Stay," Jason screamed. He ran, his feet pounding against the floor, the walls around him shifting and warping. Doors appeared and disappeared at random, some open, some leading to nothing but an abyss of writhing shadows. The creatures followed, their steps soundless, closing the distance effortlessly. Then another door, bright, glowing white, a stark contrast to everything else. It pulsed like a heartbeat beckoning. Jason didn't think. He lunged for it, fingers grasping the handle just as something cold wrapped around his ankle. He was yanked backward, his nails scraping against the floor as the creatures pulled him toward the wall, toward the shifting, screaming faces. With one final desperate effort, he kicked, freeing himself, and flung himself into the door. Silence. Jason opened his eyes. He was lying on the floor of his apartment, his glass of water spilled beside him. His breath came in ragged gasps as he looked around. Everything was normal. The city lights blinked outside his window. His laptop screen glowed softly on his desk. Had it been a dream? His heart was still hammering as he stood, rubbing his face. He turned toward the mirror near his bed, needing to ground himself. But as he stepped closer, he saw something that made his blood run cold. His reflection wasn't moving, it just stood there, staring back at him. Then, it smiled. The old VHS tape felt strangely warm in my hands, a sensation that belied its age and the chill that had settled in my bones since I unearthed it from the dusty corner of the attic. The label was blank save for a single, scrawled question mark, written in faded red ink. Curiosity, a dangerous beast I'd wrestled with my entire life, won the day. I slid the tape into my ancient VCR, the machine groaning to life like a slumbering giant. Static filled the screen, a blizzard of white noise that promised nothing but emptiness. But then something else appeared, not on the screen but inside the case. Nestled between the plastic shell and the tape itself was a folded piece of paper, yellowed and brittle with age. The paper felt almost alive, pulsing with an energy that made my fingertips tingle. Carefully I unfolded it, revealing a dense, cramped script penned in what looked like dried blood, or perhaps simply a very old and unforgiving ink. The title scrawled at the top of the page sent a shiver down my spine. The Backrooms, a traveler's lament. I settled into my armchair, the static from the screen a constant, unsettling hum. As I began to read, the room around me seemed to fade, the familiar comfort of my home dissolving into something far more sinister. I was no longer just reading a story. I was walking alongside its author, lost in the endless yellowing labyrinth of the backrooms. I don't know how long I've been here. Time has become a cruel joke, a meaningless metric in a place where the sun never rises and the clock hands are permanently frozen at some forgotten hour. I've lost track of the days, the weeks, perhaps even the months. All that remains is the endless nauseating yellow, the constant hum, and the growing, gnawing fear that I will never escape. It started innocently enough. A stumble, a dizzying shift in perspective, and then nothing. One moment I was reaching for a misplaced stapler at my monotonous office desk. The next I was standing in this godforsaken place. The air is thick, stale, and carries the faint, metallic tang of decay. The wallpaper, a hideous shade of yellow that assaults the senses, peels and bubbles in grotesque patterns as if the very walls are weeping. The hum. Gods, the hum. It's a low, resonant drone that vibrates through my bones, a constant reminder of my isolation. It fills every corner of this place, drowning out my thoughts, whispering insidious suggestions into the recesses of my mind. I try to block it out, but it's no use. It's woven into the fabric of this reality, an inescapable part of the nightmare. I've walked for what feels like an eternity. Endless corridors stretch before me, identical in their oppressive monotony. Each turn leads to another identical corridor, each room a carbon copy of the last. There are no windows, no doors leading to the outside world, only the endless yellow walls, the flickering fluorescent lights, and the maddening hum. I've tried to map this place to find some semblance of order in the chaos. I've drawn diagrams on the walls, marked passages with scraps of fabric torn from my clothes. But the back room seemed to defy all logic, shifting and changing as if mocking my efforts. The landmarks I painstakingly create disappear, the passages I mark vanish, leaving me more lost and disoriented than before. The loneliness is a crushing weight. I talk to myself, whisper stories to the empty corridors just to hear the sound of my own voice. But even that solace is fleeting. My voice sounds hollow and distorted, swallowed by the oppressive silence of the back rooms. I've seen things here, things that defy explanation, things that make my blood run cold. Shadows flicker at the periphery of my vision, fleeting glimpses of figures that disappear as soon as I turn to face them. I've heard whispers in the darkness, unintelligible murmurs that seem to claw at the edges of my sanity. One night, or what I perceive to be night, for there is no discernible difference between day and night here, I saw something truly terrifying. I was walking down a long corridor when I noticed a change in the light. It was still the same sickly yellow, but it seemed to be pulsating, growing brighter and dimmer in a rhythmic pattern. As I approached, I saw the source of the light. It was a creature, or perhaps a being, I cannot say for sure. It was tall and gaunt, with limbs that seemed impossibly long and thin. Its skin was pale and translucent, and I could see the faint outline of its bones beneath. But it was its face that truly horrified me. It had no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a smooth, blank expanse of skin. The creature stood motionless, bathed in the pulsating light. I froze, paralyzed by fear. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at the faceless being, waiting for something terrible to happen. And then it turned its head. Slowly, deliberately, it turned its head and faced me. I could feel its gaze even though it had no eyes. It was as if it was looking directly into my soul, seeing every fear, every doubt, every hidden shame. I don't know how long we stood there, locked in that silent, terrifying encounter. It could have been minutes, it could have been hours. All I know is that it felt like an eternity. Finally, the creature turned away and glided down the corridor, disappearing into the darkness. I stood there for a long time, shaking uncontrollably, before I finally found the strength to move. I turned and ran in the opposite direction, not stopping until I was completely exhausted. I haven't seen the creature since, but I know it's still out there, somewhere in the endless corridors of the back rooms. And I know that it's watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I've tried to find others, to find someone else trapped in this nightmare. I've shouted, screamed, begged for help. But my cries echo unanswered, swallowed by the endless yellow walls. I'm alone. I'm running out of hope. The back rooms are slowly breaking me, stripping away my sanity, my humanity. I feel myself changing, becoming something less than human, something more akin to the creatures that lurk in the shadows. I don't know how much longer I can last. I'm tired, so tired. Tired of walking, tired of the hum, tired of the yellow. I just want it to end. But I can't give up. I have to keep fighting, keep searching for a way out. I have to believe that there is still hope, even in this godforsaken place. I'm writing this in the hope that someone someday will find it. Someone who will understand what I've been through. Someone who will know that I existed. If you're reading this, please heed my warning. Do not stumble into the back rooms. Do not let curiosity lead you astray. For once you enter this place, there is no escape. I hear something, a shuffling sound coming from the end of the corridor. It's getting closer. I have to go. I don't think I'll be writing again. The final sentence was abruptly cut off. The ink smeared as if the writer had been interrupted mid-sentence, perhaps dragged away screaming into the endless yellow. I sat in stunned silence, the handwritten pages trembling in my hands. The static from the television seemed louder now, more menacing. I looked around my living room, the familiar objects suddenly alien and unsettling. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence heavier. I could almost feel the oppressive weight of the back rooms pressing in on me, the maddening hum vibrating through my bones. I had to get out. I had to escape the suffocating atmosphere of my house, the chilling presence of the back rooms that had somehow seeped into my reality. I grabbed my coat and keys and hurried out the door, leaving the television blaring and the handwritten pages lying on the armchair. I drove aimlessly, the headlights cutting through the darkness, searching for some semblance of peace, some escape from the horrors I had just encountered. I ended up at the local library, drawn there by some primal instinct, some desperate need for knowledge and understanding. I spent hours poring over books on psychology, on alternate realities, on the nature of consciousness. I searched for any mention of the back rooms, any explanation for the terrifying place described in the handwritten pages. But I found nothing. The back rooms seemed to exist outside the realm of conventional knowledge, a terrifying anomaly that defied explanation. As dawn broke, I returned home, exhausted and defeated. I walked back into my living room, the television still blaring, the handwritten pages still lying on the armchair. But something was different. The pages were blank. The ink had vanished, leaving behind only the yellowed, brittle paper. The story, the lament of the lost traveler, was gone. I scrambled for the VHS tape, my heart pounding in my chest. I ejected it from the VCR and examined it closely. The question mark on the label was gone. The tape was blank, devoid of any markings or inscriptions. Had I imagined it all? Had the story, the fear, the chilling encounter with the backrooms been nothing more than a figment of my imagination? But then, I noticed something. A faint yellow tinge to the wallpaper in my living room, a subtle but undeniable hue that hadn't been there before. And as I stood there, staring at the wall, I heard it. The hum, faint but unmistakable, the hum of the backrooms. I turned and fled, leaving the house behind, knowing that I could never return. The backrooms had found me, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that they would never let me go. The anonymous character, the traveler, his story was not meant to be found. The backrooms allowed it to escape, but the tale came with a burden, to deliver the curse to its next victim. And you, by reading it, are the next one. Heed the warning, run, and never look back. This is the only chance you will have. The stale, popcorn-scented air of the cinema clung to me like a shroud. I shifted in my seat, trying to ignore the nagging pressure in my bladder. On the screen, the monster, a grotesque, writhing mass of tentacles and teeth, was about to unleash its final, bloody rampage. This was the climax, the scene I'd been waiting for since the first whispers of the film circulated online. But the insistent prodding of my bladder was proving a more potent horror than anything flickering on the silver screen. I sighed, admitting defeat. I'd miss a crucial scene, maybe even the money shot, but the alternative was unthinkable. With a muttered curse under my breath, I squeezed past a row of knees and elbows, the dim light of the emergency exit sign a beacon in the near darkness. The heavy door creaked open, releasing me into the relative quiet of the hallway. The restroom was blessedly empty. The fluorescent lights hummed with a nervous energy, reflecting off the sterile white tiles. As I washed my hands, the distant screams and roars of the movie filtered through the thick walls, a bizarre counterpoint to the mundane act of drying my hands. That's when I noticed it. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the air, like a draft from a place that shouldn't exist. The humming of the lights seemed to deepen, resonating in my bones. A faint, yellowish glow emanated from the corner of my eye, beckoning me towards the end of the corridor. I hesitated. The movie was calling me back, the promise of visceral thrills still potent, but the lure of the unknown, the unsettling hum, and the strange glow was stronger. As a horror writer, I'd always been drawn to the darkness, to the places where reality frayed at the edges. This felt like a tear in the fabric itself. Against my better judgment, I started walking. The corridor stretched on longer than it should, the distance between the restroom and the source of the light expanding with each step. The stale air thickened, becoming heavy and oppressive, laced with a metallic tang that made my nostrils twitch. The sounds of the movie faded, replaced by a low, constant drone that vibrated through the floor. Finally, I reached the end. There was no door, no logical explanation for what I was seeing. Instead, the corridor simply opened into a space of impossible geometry. The air crackled with an unnatural stillness. The walls were a sickly yellow, the color of nicotine-stained fingers, and seemed to stretch on forever, converging at a vanishing point that defied perspective. The fluorescent lights, the same kind as in the restroom but infinitely more numerous, hummed with a deafening intensity, their harsh glow casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the walls like restless spirits. This was it. The backrooms. I'd read about them, of course, seen the grainy images and unsettling descriptions online. A liminal space, a glitch in the matrix, a prison of infinite corridors and oppressive monotony. I'd always dismissed it as an internet folklore, a collective nightmare born from the depths of the web. But here I was, standing on the threshold of that nightmare. The smell was overwhelming, a cloying mix of wet carpet, stagnant water, and something else, something indefinable and profoundly disturbing. My stomach churned and a wave of nausea washed over me. I took a tentative step inside. The floor was cold and damp beneath my shoes, the carpet a faded, threadbare mess that felt like it hadn't been cleaned in decades. The humming of the lights intensified, drilling into my skull. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. I wanted to turn back, to run screaming back to the relative sanity of the movie theater. But something held me back, a morbid curiosity mixed with the grim satisfaction of a writer who had just stumbled upon the ultimate source of inspiration. I took another step, then another. The corridor stretched before me, an endless labyrinth of yellow walls and buzzing lights. The air grew colder, the silence deeper. I was utterly alone. Time lost all meaning. I walked and walked and walked and walked, the endless corridors blurring into a single monotonous landscape. The only constant was the humming of the lights, the sickly yellow glow, and the oppressive feeling of being watched. My mind began to play tricks on me. I saw shadows darting in the periphery of my vision, heard whispers in the drone of the lights. I imagined faces in the faded patterns of the carpet, grotesque visages that seemed to mock my predicament. Hunger gnawed at my stomach and thirst burned in my throat. I hadn't brought anything with me, no water, no food, no means of escape. I was trapped adrift in a sea of yellow. As the days bled into weeks, or perhaps it was only hours, I couldn't be sure, the backrooms began to change. The corridors twisted and turned, forming impossible angles and dead ends. The yellow walls seemed to pulse, to breathe. The humming of the lights grew louder, more insistent, driving me closer to the brink of madness. I started to see things. Strange geometric shapes floating in the air, fleeting glimpses of figures lurking in the shadows. Were they real or were they hallucinations, figments of my sleep-deprived and starving mind? I couldn't tell. Then one day I saw it. A flicker of movement in the distance, a shadow detaching itself from the wall. I stopped, my heart pounding in my chest. It moved closer, slowly, deliberately. It was tall and gaunt, its limbs unnaturally long and slender. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel its gaze, cold and malevolent, boring into me. Fear seized me, paralyzing me. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to obey. I could only stand there, frozen, as the entity approached. It stopped a few feet away, its presence radiating an aura of pure dread. I could hear its breath, a raspy, wheezing sound that seemed to echo through the endless corridors. Then it spoke. Its voice was a low, guttural growl that vibrated in my bones. "You don't belong here," it hissed. "Leave." I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran, stumbling blindly through the corridors, the entity's words ringing in my ears. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to escape. I ran for what felt like an eternity, the entity's presence looming behind me. I could hear its footsteps, slow and deliberate, closing the distance between us. Just when I thought I couldn't run anymore, I saw it. A door shimmering faintly in the distance. It was different from the other doors I had seen in the back rooms, which were all identical, featureless slabs of yellow. This one was made of dark wood, intricately carved with strange symbols. I ran towards it desperate, the entity closing in. I reached the door and threw it open, stumbling through into a different part of the back rooms. The walls were still yellow, the lights still humming, but there was something different about this place. The air was thicker, heavier, and the smell was even more nauseating. The corridors were narrower, more claustrophobic. And there were other things here. Things that moved in the shadows, things that whispered in the drone of the lights, things that were not human. I knew then that I had made a mistake. I had escaped one horror only to stumble into another, even more terrifying. I continued to wander through the back rooms, encountering more entities, more horrors. Some were hostile, some indifferent, some simply strange. I learned to avoid them, to move silently, to blend into the shadows. I learned to survive, but survival came at a price. With each passing day, I felt myself losing a part of myself. The endless monotony, the constant fear, the lack of human contact, it was all taking its toll. I was becoming something less than human, a shadow of my former self. One day I stumbled upon a place that seemed familiar. It was a large open space, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights. In the center of the space was a row of seats facing a blank, white wall. It was a movie theater. or at least a distorted, corrupted version of one. I sat down in one of the seats, exhausted and disoriented. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the faint humming of the lights. I closed my eyes, trying to remember what it was like to be human, to watch a movie, to feel the thrill of fear without the constant weight of dread. Then I heard it, a faint, crackling sound coming from the blank wall in front of me. I opened my eyes and saw that the wall was beginning to shimmer, to ripple. A picture began to form, faint and indistinct at first, but gradually growing clearer. It was a scene from a movie. A monster, a grotesque, writhing mass of tentacles and teeth, was about to unleash its final bloody rampage. It was the movie I had been watching when I first entered the backrooms. A wave of nausea washed over me, followed by a surge of anger. I had been trapped in this nightmare for what felt like an eternity, and it all started with a stupid movie. I stood up, my fists clenched. I was done running, done hiding. I was gonna face the monster, both the one on the screen and the ones lurking in the shadows. I walked towards the wall, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer, the image on the screen grew clearer, more vivid. The monster roared, its tentacles thrashing wildly. I reached out and touched the wall, and I was back. I was sitting in my seat in the movie theater, the credits rolling on the screen. The lights were on and the other moviegoers were filing out of the theater. I looked around, disoriented. Had it all been a dream? Had I imagined the back rooms, the endless corridors, the grotesque entities? No, I knew it was real. I could still feel the cold, damp floor beneath my feet, still smell the cloying mix of wet carpet and stagnant water, and I could still hear the humming of the lights. I stood up and walked out of the theater into the bright sunlight. The world seemed different now, sharper, more real. I had seen the darkness and it had changed me. I knew that I would never be the same. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. That somewhere in the shadows, the entities of the backrooms were waiting for me to return. And I knew with a chilling certainty that one day I would. Because the backrooms, once you've seen them, never truly let you go. They become a part of you, a darkness that lingers in the corners of your mind, waiting for the opportunity to pull you back in. And all it takes is a wrong turn, a momentary lapse in judgment, a fleeting curiosity, and you're lost again. Adrift in the endless yellow corridors, forever haunted by the humming of the lights.